Today, your program team is sharing personal reflections from the past year. I'll begin by sharing some of Jan LaRock's observation, followed by my own observations. Here we are on Zoom, and it's one of the biggest changes in our lives. Zoom has brought families together and in some cases, back together. We've celebrated birthdays and holidays together all on Zoom or other similar video sharing options. Jan's family has even played games via Zoom that were previously only played in family living rooms. This demonstrates you can be together without physically being together. And Zoom has allowed us, the members of this fellowship, to get back together, not only for Sunday services, but for happy hours and other church-related activities. Thank you, Zoom. Jan has also been inspired by the people who have used their talents and good fortunes to help so many in the community who are in real need. For example, football player J.J. Watt has provided significant financial support to the Houston Food Bank. Angelina Jolie has donated to the No Kid Hungry group. And let's face it, when celebrities like these donate to worthy nonprofits, it provides those organizations with much needed publicity that prompts others to donate as well. So way to go, celebrities. At the other end of the spectrum, 10-year-old Max Woolsey from Devon, England, has raised over $100,000 for a hospice in North Devon, simply for sleeping in his own tent for over 200 nights in a row. He and countless other regular people are raising much needed money for charities all over the world. Thank you, Max, for your inspiration. We've also changed the way we celebrate with drive-by birthday parties and graduations, just to name a couple. The crafters and sewers out there created so many masks that Walmart ran out of fabric, thread, and plastic. That's an awful lot of crafting. Many people have turned their talents elsewhere and have become accomplished bakers, much to the dismay of our waistlines, while others have learned new languages and some have even created funny and clever videos to keep us amused on social media. Choir members have even sung from their cars in parking lots just so they could all sing together. Our newfound isolation has brought out the creativity in many people, making both their lives and our lives better. So keep up the good work and keep on imagining new and creative ways we can help and come together. Teachers have also risen to the challenge, and they've had to reinvent themselves, actually several times over the course of the last 9 months. Many are now teaching both online and in person, often at the same time. In some cases, this has doubled their prep time for each and every class. Music teachers and art teachers are also teaching, and they've come up with new techniques to teach their classes using completely new methods. Thanks goes out to all the dedicated teachers who are teaching our youth in ever new and inventive ways. Way to go. And lastly, but without a doubt, not the least, our thanks goes out to the dedicated and courageous healthcare workers and first responders who are saving lives each and every minute of every day. Their commitment is truly humbling and appreciated beyond comprehension. Thank you, one and all. Now, before I share my own reflections, I sent out a fellogram requesting your hopes for the future. Jimmy Dunn replied that he hopes for the COVID-19 pandemic to go away as people get their vaccine shots and continue to wear their masks in public. Jimmy also hopes that Congress will pass a bill paying for free tuition in public colleges, since education is the key to prosperity for individuals and nations. He reminds us that 7 European countries have free universities and that the US should do the same. Now on to my observations. Well, what a year it's been. I had actually been looking forward to 2020 for many years. You see, I planned my retirement in 2020, and all my plans were finally coming to fruition. However, actual retirement became a non-event because 2 weeks before the date of full-blown retirement at the end of March, the country went into full pandemic mode and everything shut down. My last 2 work weeks were spent teleworking from home, which was also the first time in 39 years I was allowed to telework. No party, no send-off, no nothing. Quite frankly, no problem. I didn't much care for my last job, so leaving it and the 39 years in the pipeline industry turned out to be a non-event. Since that inauspicious ending, however, I've gotten back into exercise, walking mostly. I've gone home to Shreveport almost monthly to see my 92-year-old dad, who is now in an assisted living facility. I've volunteered almost daily for the fellowship on one thing or another, and Randy and I have settled into our new home and life back here in Houston. One reality that's truly hit me is that I'm a confirmed introvert. Isolation due to the pandemic hasn't affected me one iota. Being home with Randy has not been a problem, and to the contrary, it's been an absolute joy. It has, however, given me plenty of time to reflect on life and everything else, and that's just what I've done. As I just mentioned, I'm an introvert, so staying home is no big deal. For the extroverts in the world, of which there are many, that same experience has been a kind of torture. Extroverts tend to need to be going somewhere and doing something, and this pandemic has limited all their much needed extracurricular activities. And while I have some sympathy for their problems, my heart has mostly gone out to the people who've lost their jobs and their real struggles to simply survive. You see, we live across from a large African American church, and they often provide food and COVID tests to the needy. There are frequently mile-long lines of cars waiting to get help, and those people tug on my heart a little more than postponed vacations to the Grand Canyon. And around the corner, just a little over a mile away, is a little-known hospital in Houston called United Memorial Medical Center. It primarily serves the poor and is currently packed with COVID patients. It's been profiled numerous times on CNN, and the head doctor, Dr. Joseph Verone, hasn't taken a day off in over 256 days. The images of overwhelmed doctors and nurses and respiratory therapists and aides and janitors is absolutely heartbreaking. And because of those images and those realities and the frequent lines of people getting food, I found it difficult to summon much empathy for those who have been merely inconvenienced by this pandemic. And for those who won't wear masks, I have managed to summon a great deal of contempt and scorn, and even ended at least one 60-plus-year-old family relationship. I simply have little time or energy for the whining about the stress of wearing masks when all you have to do is open your eyes and look around you, and you'll see the terrible toll this pandemic has taken on far too many people here in Houston and around the world. But for me, my reality is pretty wonderful, and I'm blessed, and I don't want to take it for granted. I have a wonderful home with Randy. I have plenty to eat and the financial resources to meet all my actual needs. My health is good. My extended family is fine, and 3 of them have even received the first of 2 vaccination shots for COVID. I have many wonderful friends here in Houston, and I have a fellowship community of friends, which gives me something meaningful to support in my spare time. So, all in all, life is good, and I am very grateful.
On 2020, I've had difficulty with the general bashing of the year 2020 as if it was responsible for the admittedly cataclysmic events that have occurred during its 12-month span. I tend to see the year more as a space during which all of the bad stuff went down, rather than as the perpetrator of the events, and in the same space in which many wonderful things also happened. I am deeply aware that my family and I have been very fortunate this year in which so many have lost so much. My husband, Robert, my brother, Bill, and I were able to transition to a life lived mostly at home and online. From Robert's work as a university professor, which admittedly required a big and stressful learning curve on my part to help him migrate his jazz history classes online, I call myself his teaching assistant, to shopping primarily online, to doing nearly all social contact online, for which I am grateful. Life would have been so much worse without Zoom and its analogs, but as we all know, it's not the same as actually being in one another's presence. Music was a different matter. Our beloved Civic Jazz Orchestra had to be left behind in the real world. And it's been 9 long months since we've been able to get together to make music. That absence leaves a large and deep space that only playing music together can fill. We are so looking forward to rehearsing together again in 2021. But one will not return. Our bassist and dear friend, Anibal Ambert, died from COVID less than a month ago. It was totally unexpected and devastating to us and to the whole music community in Houston. He was a truly lovely, affectionate, generous, talented, and patient man. He was always up for a project. I never once saw him lose his temper, and he was delightfully and tirelessly funny. There is a lot of good music that will not happen now that he is gone. But life is paradox, and where losses occur, space is created for something else to move in. Echoing John, I also am an introvert who, because of the things I enjoy doing or have to do, find myself in extrovert mode a great deal of the time. The pandemic isolation brought welcome and healing solitude to me. I had time to be with myself and take part with some intention in the internal conversation that comes with inhabiting a human psyche. I am discovering deeper levels of familiar and unfamiliar aspects of myself and growing to recognize and be comfortable with them. In our usually hectic lives, this is a precious gift. Another blessing. My daughter and her husband now live 11 minutes from our house. They and we make up our social bubble. We have dinner or some kind of get together at least once a week. We run errands for each other. We watch their cats when they are away. This much maligned year also brought my precious grandson. All grandparents know what I'm talking about. I got to be a classic grandmother, going with Gracie to her doctor's appointments, seeing the baby in the ultrasound monitor, feeling his muffled kicks through the taut drum of her belly. The night he was born, I, who have seen so many babies born as a maternity nurse, couldn't be with my own daughter when she was giving birth. Thankfully, her husband was allowed to be with her. I got text updates through the long night of labor. He did his best to keep me informed until things got too intense. And then he handed the phone over to an understanding nurse. At 4:30 in the morning, 15 minutes after he entered the world, I got texts with pictures of the baby crying, of Gracie holding the baby, laughing and crying, with David holding both of them, smiling and crying. And I sat up in my bed in the dark, smiling and crying. Thanks to that nurse, I felt that I was present for that wonderful moment of my grandson's birth. So, along with all the unimaginable sorrows and losses, there are also profound gains and joys, and they both occurred in the space-time of 2020. And I am sadder, and I am grateful.
I think we can all agree that 2020 was a year we will not soon forget. Although it started out normal, or should I say normal in the sense that the major issues to deal with were things we were familiar with. Things like what our president was up to, wildfires in Australia, a plane was shot down in the Ukraine, a volcano erupted in Tal, and a U.S. basketball star was killed in a helicopter crash in Hollywood. And we kept hearing about this outbreak of virus in China, but nothing really abnormal to worry about in our cozy homes in Houston, right? Remember, we joked about Mother Earth was exacting her revenge upon us? But by March, it became more alarming. The virus had made its way to Missouri City, and then the Houston Livestock and Rodeo was shut down. We were asked to shelter in place, and we started telling jokes about toilet paper hoarders, and then we couldn't find sanitary wipes anywhere. The UUA suggested shutting down our places of worship, and most of us just sheltered in place and waited while watching charts and political figures telling us conflicting messages. Was it a hoax or a death warrant? Numbers of the infected rose, and we heard horror stories of situations in the New York hospitals. The political rhetoric rose due to the election year, and we watched the Democratic candidate debates as the participation of candidates dwindled and political division escalated. Parts of our homes became sanitary stations with ample supplies of disinfectants, soaps, and we gained a new wardrobe of masks. Masks were turning up everywhere. Friends and family members were taking to their sewing machines and churning them out. I even own a couple original rocks furnished by Janice to our fellowship members. We at the fellowship hunkered down. We learned about social media and communication mostly with Facebook posts, then Facebook chats. We counted the number of hits on Facebook and made our phone calls as supplements. We discovered Zoom, and we were off on a new adventure in religious presentations. We learned about living in a virtual reality. If that wasn't bad enough, it was the early hurricane season, with hurricanes skirting east of Houston, not once, not twice, but 3 times, hitting our neighbors in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, not to mention the East Coast. We ran out of letters to name storms, and we had to resort to another alphabet to end the season. And it seemed like the whole West Coast was burning. Throw in a few tornadoes, floods, and the jokes about Mother Nature's wrath became real. Interspersed in all this, we heard of police shootings of unarmed black men walking through a neighborhood, men resisting inquiries, men jogging and driving while black. But what really pulled our heads up out of the sand was seeing a man choked to death on national TV. We learned about Black Lives Matter, and I believe we finally understood. Some of us took to the streets, and the Fellowship Program Committee dedicated 3 programs to the issue of racism in America. Dr. Anthony Harris, Reverend John Pepper, and myself tried to educate and tell our real stories to demonstrate what it was like growing up in a racially divided America, and that white privilege is real. We made it through an election, recounts and more recounts, and finally a conclusion. Vaccinations are rolling out, and the winter weather has calmed the fires and winds. We can rest and catch our breath. But 2020 was a bugaboo of a year. My father-in-law, who turned 100 last June, confirmed it was the worst year of his life. And to me, that is saying something. I didn't face any real hardships as I am retired and financially secure. So the shutdown of businesses was nothing more than an annoyance. I received a new hip in 2020 and found the quarantine complemented my recovery. My family in Wisconsin and friends in Houston pulled through. So to me, 2020 was a frustrating spectator sport, and I'm optimistic about 2021. We have new leadership. We know more about the environment. We know more about social injustice. We know what to expect from our fellow citizens, some good and some bad. We have speeded up emerging trends in telecommunications, working from home, distance learning, and long-distance caregiving. We have time to focus on ourselves, clean out our houses, and save money by lowering our day-to-day expenses. We have had time to reflect on what kind of a country we want to live in, and have learned we need to continue to fight for social justice. In some ways, the isolation has brought us closer. In some cases, just by spending more time living with a loved one. And in others, the realization of how important relationships are to us. It is my hope that we can build on what we have learned as we go forward. Vaccines are coming, and I hope we have learned to wash our hands. Covering our faces is not a bad thing, and we can help and be civil to one another. The fellowship will open again, and it will be nice to see everyone as we brush away the dust of 2020 and look anew. Personally, I know our sanitation station at my house here will continue with our disinfectant sprays, sanitary wipes, masks, and latex gloves. They will remain and perhaps dwindle away in time. My wardrobe of masks will be on standby and worn as my confidence builds. I hope to travel back to my home state and touch my family and friends there with hugs and kisses. I don't think anything will be the same after the virus is presumably gone. We must stay vigilant, take the health and welfare of our fellow men seriously, and continue to strive to be better.
Here at the beginning of a new year, with our burning bowl ceremony, we symbolically let go of the bad or negative things in our lives, things that may have dominated us during the past year. Of course, we want to let go of the very negative 2020, but we could also let go of angers or hurts that really serve no purpose. What you let go of is strictly up to you, and it is private. Only you need to know what it is, but we participate in this ritual together. On your behalf, we will burn pieces of paper that traditionally you would have written on, but with our ongoing pandemic, that simply wasn't possible. I encourage you to go ahead and mentally participate in the ritual anyway, imagining that one of the pieces of paper is yours and that you wrote on it, naming something you will be letting go of and watching it go up in smoke. As the 2021 year progresses and you find you are still holding on to what you symbolically let go of, simply stop, collect your thoughts, and mentally reenact this burning bowl ceremony again, and then move on again. Perfection is not the goal. Moving on and letting go of the harmful past is. Amen and namaste.